So if we're saying one thing on the outside and we're not doing it on the inside, the truth will out. The ultimate outcome of all training is changing behaviour. Any program, as far as I'm concerned, is about giving people an amnesty. Everybody does the best job they can do.
Yes.
Sometimes we just don't have the right tools to be able to do that. Managerial level, this is a owner level. That's not all business is good business. This crawlback from organisations say, oh no, we don't want you to work from home.
Yeah.
The economic data says it doesn't make any difference. In fact, the outcomes seem to be better when people are working at home. If you don't know what your purpose is, then how do you know what's important? Our behaviours inside the organisation have to link to that brand.
Yes.
And if we don't, we create cracks. Because the sense of dissatisfaction is the bit that drives the change. And so I don't understand why my staff won't work with the Alps God's ends.
Right.
And I'd have the conversation because they don't own the business.
Right.
Their stake is different.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the simplest and most powerful ways to think about motivation for people.
Here we are. Welcome again to a new edition of our latest edition of our MECast series. I'm joined today by a good old friend of mine, actually. We've worked together. I've had the pleasure of working with you before. Yeah. Is Robin Lodge. So Robin, talk to us about who you are and what work that you do. Okay. Sell yourself, basically.
Okay. I'll give it my best shot. So as you know, my name's Robin. We've known each other for a long time. The areas that I work in are primarily leadership and management. That can either be developing training programs, it can be coaching people, it can be profiling people. So profiling involves looking at their behaviours and how their behaviours fit within the organisation. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later. And everything in between, really. So developing programs, bringing specialist people in to support that, either creating or sometimes we'll have a bulk standard program that we make some modifications to so that it becomes very pertinent into the organisation. All the work we do is geared towards where the organisation is going. And also it's geared into how they see themselves, so back into their culture, thinking about how they operate and how they work. So we're very keen that we support people through those programs, but I guess we're a little bit different because we can be very challenging with people as well. So we integrate very much into HR, into L&D, into the line management mechanisms of the business to ensure that what we're doing is actually creating change. And of course, all training, the ultimate outcome of all training is changing behavior.
Yes.
Whether that be putting in a new system, a new piece of IT, ultimately you're changing behavior. So we have several support mechanisms that help make that behavioral change happen within the organization. Our client group is very varied. So we've worked with people like Sony PlayStation, the Imperial War Museum. We work with several city banks, several city lawyers. We've even had a bit of experience working with the Olympic Committee when we had the Olympics in London.
Okay, yes.
So very, very varied, small micro businesses of one or two people right up to people like 3M. So very broad in terms of our experiences.
Yeah. So I was reminded, actually, talking to you earlier, that we've probably known each other for about 20 years. So obviously we were both teenagers when we first met. And interestingly enough, at the time, I was a student, if you could call it that. So the business that I worked with employed the business that you were working for, and you came in and you did some management and leadership training.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember listening to you. The way you delivered the training felt very directed at me whilst I was in a room of other people, and you got my attention. And I think it was the beginning part of the journey I was on, which was about in the brand space, as you know. We've worked together quite a few times ever since then, and I was really understanding the outside brand versus the inside brand. And I think that I remember sort of reflecting in some of the things you were talking about and thinking to myself, well, this is so interesting. Really, there's a promise outwardly that a lot of businesses and organisations have. But if it's not owned on the inside, I mean, it's broken, it's fragmented, isn't it? It doesn't make any sense. I think it's the way that you deliver that and make that purposeful. So, for example, if someone gets you involved, are we in the situation where they get you involved because they think they need some training of some description, and then once you get into a discussion with them, you're quickly able to say, well, actually, do you know, I think I might need to do some work over here. This might be, you know, how might that work with you?
Okay, so if we start at the very beginning, the majority of my work is referral, probably about 99.9%. It's referral based. So I'll normally have an introduction. We'll go in, we'll have a meeting. That might be virtual, might be face-to-face, depending on timetables, etc. And we'll just have a conversation. People will tell me what's going on within the business. Sometimes they'll understand what the issue is and they'll have a very clear idea about what they want and what they need. Other times they won't. And sometimes what they'll start describing is the symptoms rather than the problem. A classic example is somebody who's not performing. May well be actually it's not them that's not performing, maybe their manager that's not doing what they should be doing.
I like that, yeah.
So we'll have those conversations, and what we'll then move towards is what I call co-creation. So let's sit down, let's get a flip chart or a virtual board or something, and let's just start drawing some ideas together about what you want to see happening and how you see it flowing, how you see it in the business, and also, very importantly, is the discussion about what success looks like. So people go in and they'll say things to me like, you know, we need to improve our leadership. And I liken that. I know you like stories, so here's a little story for you. I liken that to when people say you need to improve your communication skills. And people go, you need to improve your communication skills. I'll say to them, when somebody says that to you, just say the following to them. Do you want me to talk more, talk less, listen more, listen less, more emails, less emails, more presentations, less presentations, more SMS, less SMS? Get the idea?
Yeah.
It's too broad. You can't
it's
work
not
with
very
it.
specific, is
Absolutely. So we'll have those sorts of conversations. And in that co-creation, I'm gaining understanding of the business and how it works, gaining understanding of their values, and actually gaining an understanding about how real those values are. So in a number of organizations, the values are just put on the wall, and that's what we do. And what we try to do is bring those values into the training so that the training actually has value within itself to reinforce the values of the organization and to help perhaps even transform the business so that we get that alignment that you were talking about between what we say on the outside and what we get on the inside. And of course, if we're saying one thing on the outside and we're not doing it on the inside, the truth will out.
Absolutely.
Somewhere along the line.
So it's interesting you talk about values. Have you ever found yourself thinking, well, this is really interesting, so I'm looking at your values, and actually, I don't know where these came from, but I don't think these are your values. Because, of course, at the heart of this is about, for you, it's about people, and you've obviously got an innate ability to recognise that really quickly. Do you ever find yourself challenging some of those values?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily what the values are, it's about what the values mean.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I'll go into an organisation, and this is quite common, value, honesty. So, okay, so you want everybody to tell the truth all the time, regardless. Well, yeah. Well, even if you've messed up a customer, customer output, or somebody's not done what they should do, but it's acceptable. You want to tell the truth all the time. Well, no, not all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reality is that when people start talking about values, they're missing one important step, and the important step is, how do we know it's being done?
Right.
So, for instance, if integrity is another one, behaviour integrity. So, in order to behave with integrity, we need to understand what integrity is.
Yes.
But we also need to understand what integrity looks like.
Yes.
And probably understand that in different parts of the business, integrity will look slightly different.
Yes.
So we've got to, we've almost like, if we take that value set, then we produce like a playbook that helps each department really understand what working in an honest way looks like, or being agile looks like, or one of my favorites is that it's always a good conversation is customer centric. What does that actually mean? How do people do this stuff?
Yes.
Local authorities, for instance, went through a phase where one of their values was be commercial. And it's like, what does that you want? And people
mean?
said to me, are we supposed to sell stuff?
Yes.
And what it meant was actually, let's just be careful how we spend our pennies more than anything else.
Yes.
So I think...
treat the money as if it were our own.
Exactly it.
Right,
exactly
I got you.
It's a simple... And why not say that?
Yeah. Why not say that? Yes. Yes.
So there's this... there is this gap between sort of what our values are and then what are the behaviours that demonstrate that we are keeping to our values. So we try and build things like that into the programme as well.
Yeah. So typical programs will be what? And to what sorts of business? I mean, I was interested to hear that you were saying earlier you've worked with 1 and 2 man bands, as they're called, all the way up to big organisations. And one of the things I know is that actually at the heart of this, some of the methodology is entirely the same. You know, it just gets more complex the more people, the more layers you add to that. So talk to me about some of the work that you do.
Okay, so for instance, one of the programs that I run is a program called Aspire, which is a 5-day program. That's been built on, dare I say, nearly 40 years of experience, understanding where some of the key pressure points are for first-line managers. And often I'll start talking to people and they'll go, oh, I don't really know what I want. So let me give you a straw donkey to play with.
Yeah.
This is what this looks like. I can move it around. I can change it however you want it. And they'll go, actually, that solves 95% of the problems. So we have the sort of standard units that we can put together. But we also do design work as well. So my title in the business is Chief Learning Architect. It's not Chief Trainer. It's not MD. It's Chief Learning Architect, which means I help to design, create the programs, which may involve e-learning, might involve videos, could involve all sorts of things, depending on client budget, depending on what we're trying to achieve as well. But the key thing is about being really clear on the message. What message are we trying to give people here?
Yeah.
And I guess the other part of that is about what I call the organizational prerogative. So, for instance, Lee, you come on training with me, and I show you how to conduct a one-to-one. You go back to work. I haven't got time for that. So, where's the organizational pressure for you to change? Because that's the only way you'll change.
Yes.
Okay. So, if we've got groups of people, then we can create a balancing point or a tipping point where we can force that issue through. But for many training programs, actually, the question is always about, so why should I change?
Yeah.
You're sort of, I know you're maybe creating a better world for me. You're creating a way where I can manage my priorities a bit more effectively. But where's the push from the business for me to do this stuff? Yeah. So that's one of the things that we have to do. That's why we liaise with line managers and HR to actually try and create that energy.
Yes.
That says the reason I'm here is to make this happen.
Yes.
Which will hopefully align itself to what the business is trying to achieve.
Yes.
So we're very focused on the outputs and enabling people to make that happen. So, part of the program is about saying to people, any program, as far as I'm concerned, is about giving people an amnesty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everybody does the best job they can do.
Yes.
Sometimes we just don't have the right tools to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So there's no point in blaming or complaining about people if they haven't got the right tools to do the job.
Yeah.
If they've got the right tools to do the job, that's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
But if they haven't got the right tools to do the job, then we can't blame them. And my job is to help create those sets of tools.
Yes.
Whether they be mental or physical or psychological, to help people to succeed and move forward.
So do you do anything in the space of and again, we worked together over the years. So one of the things that this is actually quite interesting. So when we're selling brands to people, I always, a bit like being a hypnotist, I always say to people, whenever you hear the word brand, I want you to replace that with the word business. So if I talk about brand strategy, I'm actually talking about business strategy. If I talk about brand positioning, I'm talking about business positioning. And it's just getting a full understanding, in the most part, be it the owner, the MD, the C-suite, all the way down through the line, that really all we're actually trying to do is align a promise that their business is saying to assumingly customers, that will connect, that communication will connect. So that's our drive. Our drive is to align whatever this message is here that I'm trying to sell you, because at the end of the day, businesses are commercial entities in the most part. So they need to affect something by, it could be, you and I have always done this thing, which is about, what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What do I expect to happen here? So this is where I think our work is really closely aligned, because we're talking about building propositions that connect with our clients' customers. And what you're talking about is facilitating the machine, the people. That at the end of the day, this all happens because of people.
Absolutely.
Number one, understanding what this is. What is it that we do? Why are we even here? What is expected of me individually, or what is expected of us as a team? So that is quite interesting. I like the word architecture as well that you use, because I think that's something that I use a lot recently, actually. I think it's a phrase that helps bring structure to our purpose.
And that's the key word for me, is it's all about purpose. So a lot of the work, surprisingly enough, is about helping people to not necessarily create their purpose, but understand the importance of in purpose. So for instance, we're talking about priority management. If you don't know what your purpose is, then how do you know what's important? And I know you like I know you like stories. So an example is Alice in Wonderland, where Alice is walking down the path and she comes to a fork in the road, and opposite the fork is the mushroom with the caterpillar smoking the hookah. And she looks up and down, looks to the left, looks to the right, and she looks up at the caterpillar and she says, which road should I take? And the caterpillar replies, where are you going? To which Alice retorts, I don't really know. To which the caterpillar then responds with, then it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah, like that.
And this is the thing with people. You're asking about one of the changes that we've seen. One of the changes that we've seen is a lot of people are under a lot more pressure to do a lot more work. And then when they can't do that, sometimes they get bashed with this, they're not a great performer, they're not a poor performer. But if somebody is overburdened, it doesn't matter how good a performer they are, they're not going to be successful. So people get very confused about their purpose. I think some people are generally overworked, which in itself, we can't create a magic wand that fixes that situation. That goes back to the organization. How does this link into the organization? Well, sometimes what we do, we create within the training, is a sense of dissatisfaction. And I think that's really important, because the sense of dissatisfaction is the bit that drives the change. So we know we should be having one-to-ones. Why aren't we having one-to-ones? I need a one-to-one to make myself better and improve my performance. Or it might be they go back and they say, you know what, I actually don't understand what the key objectives are of my department or my organization. So how can I effectively make decisions that draw us into that position? And purpose is incredibly strong, because even when you come to decision making, there's only really two decisions or two outcomes from any decision. Something that's going to take me towards my purpose, or something that's going to take me away from my purpose.
I like that.
So why should I not do that? And the absence of the purpose then creates what I call decisions of convenience. So what we do is we just take the easy path, because we may be under a little bit of pressure. And we just need to get something out the door. And then invariably, that decision will come back and bite us in the future because we've not been medium to long term thinking. We've just thought about, I'm in a little bit of pain here now.
Yeah.
But we don't think the pain will get us later.
I like that. So do you help affirm organisations' purpose, or do you help them define it?
Yeah,
ultimately,
good question. It can be. It depends on the size of the business, obviously. It can be both. Sometimes it's if I'm working with a smaller organisation, it might be asking the simple question that actually, what are you trying to do here? Because sometimes, like all small medium businesses, we try to do everything for everyone. And then we lose sight of what we're actually there to do.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why we're not creating the results that we want, that we desire, because we're too busy satisfying everyone and not realizing that actually we should be saying no to people.
Yeah.
And this is at managerial level. This is at owner level. That's not all business is good business.
Yes.
And it's quite important to understand that. And I certainly come across businesses where actually they discover that they're making losses on clients and they should be jettisoning them. And I do what I say. So every 3 months, I literally sit down with my customer base and go through it with a fairly fine-tooth comb and decide whether I want to work with them or not.
Yeah.
Because if they're not creating value, and I'm not just talking about profit here, but if I'm working with them, I want to see something coming out of that work. So if it's an organisation where I'm just going in, doing a tick box and nothing is changing, then that is no personal reward for me.
Yes.
And why would I want to do that when I can be working with organisations that do want to create change?
Yes.
Do want to move out of perhaps a stagnant position and make stuff happen for themselves, because that's far more exciting for everybody.
Yes. So talk to me about, one of the things, there's lots of triggers that make people ring me or make people ring you, contact us because of an assumed need. So one of the things we've been doing a lot of work on recently is kind of the three phases of a business cycle, if you like, which is as simple as build, scale, exit. If you really strip it down, you're starting. Now it's interesting because the build stage could happen at any given time. You don't have to be a new business to be in the build stage.
Absolutely.
This is like you're performing storming wheel. So and I like those conversations with clients because I think it gives us the ability to say, what does this look like for you? And by the way, I mean, if COVID's given us anything, it's like, maybe it isn't what it used to be. Maybe this is a chance to, in our world, we realign the business, we realign the brand because their audience has moved and they haven't realised that.
So I guess, from a personal perspective, COVID hit us and we had to flip. And quite frankly, we saw lockdown coming. And when it hit, I think we spent 2 to 3 weeks going, that's it then, game over. And then we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps and went, this is ridiculous. Let's get out there. Let's do some remote stuff. And remote stuff was happening, but the appetite was quite low. So we started doing that stuff, and now we're doing face-to-face, we're doing remote stuff, we're doing hybrid stuff.
Right, yes.
We're working in all sorts of interesting ways with clients. But what's quite fascinating is actually in talking to clients, the question that I find really interesting is that when COVID hit, people could work from home.
Yes.
And businesses had no choice.
Yes.
They had to embrace that stuff. And now what I'm seeing is this crawl back from organizations say, oh, no, we don't want you to work from home.
Yeah.
The economic data says it doesn't make any difference. In fact, the outcomes seem to be better when people are working at home. But organizations are now pulling people back into the workplace. And I'm seeing a number of workplaces where actually it's creating quite a lot of conflict.
Yes.
And And I don't think it's necessarily helped by some of the comments that have been made by government. I'm not going to go into that conversation. But saying things like "get back to work" are not helpful comments.
No,
because the majority of people worked harder when they were actually at home. Than they did when they were in the business. So that's sort of one key thing that's going on. I think people are starting to look for a bit more freedom, a bit more choice in. Do I have to be in 5 days a week? Why can't I be in 4 days? Why can't I be in 3 days?
What do you think? What do you think that it? I think this is such an interesting conversation, and we could probably spend hours on this. And I'm both ways on this. But because again, as individuals, we all react in different ways. But primarily, my feeling is that culture, the notion of business culture, is much more tangible with real people in real environments. Versus a hybrid scenario. I mean, honestly, I know people who really don't like the workspace. They're very happy to work from home,
Absolutely.
And to your point, their output is probably far greater. But it's quite interesting, just that in itself, by definition, that person might then not be plugged in.
Well, it's quite. So let's just go back a step, because quite interestingly, there was a thing a few months ago about the government saying, we want to encourage flexible working, etc., etc. But the reality is this: that not everybody can work from home. It takes a certain mindset to be able to work, a certain discipline to work from home. Some people don't want to work from home, and certain job roles are not suitable
to work from home.
Work from home. So, it does throw it up to think about. So, how do we manage this in a way that works for everybody, but understanding that those three parameters.
Yes.
So, I'm working with an organisation at the moment, for instance, where people just have to be in 2 days.
Right.
And they're managing everything quite tightly when people are working remotely. I'm now starting to do a bit of work with them in terms of helping them to think about what their culture looks like and how they're creating that. So part of the conversation is about when we have people remotely, so this is another lesson from COVID, I think. When people are working remotely, how do we connect with those people? And one of the great sadnesses about COVID is that when we put everybody into isolation and people started to work from home on their own, they were just left to it.
You're right.
And managers will say, I don't want to phone them because they're going to be busy.
Yes.
Et cetera, et cetera. But people still needed connection.
Yeah. It wasn't literally out of sight, out of
absolutely,
mind.
Absolutely, yeah. And we know that. I mean, in one of my very first training jobs, I worked for an organisation in Southend, and they opened an office 100 metres away. And never the twain will talk.
Yeah, right. Yes.
And even two floor, floor 7 and floor 6, never the twain will talk.
Yes.
So you're creating that problem. So part of the challenge is about, so how do we create an environment that gives people enough freedom to operate, but also keeps them connected?
Yes.
And I think we talked about purpose earlier. Purpose is really important. So, one organisation I was working with, they sent people home, and they just became transactional. It was just another piece of paper. And they totally lost sight of the fact that they were dealing with a group of people who were extremely vulnerable at that moment in time and needed support. It just became a paper trail, an email trail.
Yes.
And the people were totally forgotten about because people had lost sense of their purpose.
Yeah.
So when we came back, the first conversation, the first piece of work we had to do was actually, let's reestablish the purpose, what we're about. And people openly admitted, you know what, I forgot.
Yes. Because
actually all I've got is this inbox with all these emails on, and all I've got to do is work my way through them.
Yes.
So, all of these things are connected. You're talking about brand. Brand is connected to purpose. We do the branding. We've got to make sure that, and you're the expert, so I'm going to say this stuff, and you can shoot me down if you like. But the brand's got to support what we're doing.
Yes.
The brand's got to give the message of the purpose, and we've got to be very clear on how we want to represent ourselves, but not only how we want to represent ourselves, but what we stand for as well.
Yes.
And I think that's something that I'm seeing is missing in many areas of life, is that people seem to want the choice, but they don't want the responsibility, and that they are also, they're responsible for stuff, and they're responsible role models, and they go off and they do silly things. And you go, what is that all about?
Yes.
Why would you do that?
Why would you do that? Yeah.
Why? It's so obvious, it's now, it's been going on for 20, 30, 40 years, probably even longer. And people still don't learn the lesson. Don't put yourself in that position. And that's what we try to do as well in our training. Don't put yourself in that position. Align yourself to the brand. The brand has got a message. It's very important. Our behaviours inside the organisation have to link to that brand.
Yes.
And if we don't, we create cracks.
Yeah.
And those cracks will eventually open up, and that stuff will come out and hit your clients. And that's not a good thing.
No. Talk to me about motivation. I mean, at the end of the day, we all work because we kind of have to, in the most part. Some might be lucky and really, really love. I think when being at work, being wherever we might be, whether we're at management level, running the business, or indeed at any level, I think motivation is just such an important thing. I think it. What do you say about motivation? What and where do you come at that from what you do?
Okay, again, it's a really interesting question. I've been on both sides as a business owner and an employee, and I remember working for an individual, and they would work all the hours God sends. And they say, I don't understand why my staff won't work all the hours God sends.
Right,
and
yeah.
I'd have the conversation, because they don't own the business.
Right,
Their
yeah.
stake is different
Yeah.
in this. But we can move away from, and people often quote me, are we going to do Maslow? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? And I think there's some great work. Simon Sinek based some of his stuff on a guy called Decci. And they talk about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, give me the freedom to do the job that you're asking me to do. And we all we all have a bad word to say about micromanagement, and it's like the anathema. Everyone's really, really sort of, I don't want to be micromanaged, but that's what happens. You don't pay people and then tell them how to do their job.
Yes.
It's the most frustrating thing in the world.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
Then the second level is, the second factor is this mastery one. And a great way of thinking about this is that many people play musical instruments. And I often do this in the group. Who plays a musical instrument? Somebody will put their hand up. Do you practice? Yes, I practice. Well, why do you practice? I practice to get better. You see, I think Adam Smith said, I think it was Adam Smith who said, man is an economic animal.
Right.
Only does stuff for money. When you practice a musical instrument, you don't get paid for it. I play golf.
Yeah.
Not very good, but I play golf and I practice. Nobody pays me for that. Why do I do it? Because I want to get better.
I want to get better, yeah.
At what I do.
Yeah.
So understand that people do want to be good at what they do.
Yes.
And that we should provide those opportunities for them. It's
Yeah,
actually quite
interesting.
important. And then, of course, we get purpose. And purpose about, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What benefit am I going to create for other people while we're focusing on this? Because that takes us out of the transactional, and it creates value for us. And again, I think one of the things that we tended to forget about is that when going's tough, what we do is we tend to very dangerous thing. We tend to drop our standards a little bit and go, we had COVID and we had to give people a bit of space to settle down, etc. And what you're actually doing is saying to people, your job is not that important anymore.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And perhaps what we should have done is gone, your job is very important. We need high standards because it's so important. And if it's important, then you're creating purpose for people.
Yes.
So you can see there you've got the autonomy, the mastery, and the purpose.
I like that.
And then a little way to think about it is that if you want to plug in, get it? plug
Yes,
in.
yes, very good.
So 13 amp fuse.
Yeah.
Plug amp into people's motivation,
Yeah.
and that's probably one of the simplest and most powerful ways to think about motivation for people.
Yes.
Are the other theories mad? Of course they are. The other theories are valid. They've been shown to work. But I think in the society we live in today, this very complex place that is constantly changing and shifting. People are making more demands. We know this stuff is happening. Young people coming in for interviews. It's not what can you do for our business. It's what's the business going to do for me.
Yeah.
Another flip that we need to be aware of, and we need to be able to work with that stuff.
That's I would love to just grab a minute on that. That's so interesting because we have in our own business, we've worked with apprentices and interns, and I'm seeing. And funny enough, at the beginning, I was afraid of it actually because I didn't like what I was hearing.
Yeah.
But I think I've managed to really understand that that's all they know. Wherever that's come from, it is what it is. And then actually every day has become very educational to me because of that understanding. Not least, ironically, as a business that's in the marketing and communications, we should probably adopt some of this psychology outwardly because of the market that's coming.
Absolutely.
Basically. So from an organizational change and mentorship, what's your comments on that?
I mean, there are some tools out there like reverse mentoring.
Right.
So younger, less experienced people mentoring us in the ways of the world, because we're grey-haired wisdom, as it were. The world is changing. So yes, we have got wisdom, but I'd like to think we've got wisdom. But the reality is the world is changing. Do I experience the world like they experience? No, I don't.
Yeah.
I think the second level is we created that.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I love that.
Created that.
That's fact, isn't it?
Absolutely. So being able to accept feedback or criticism,
Yes.
is actually an important part of growth.
Yes.
So again, that's another little mantra that people might like to think about. It's one that we use all the time. It's honesty with positive intent.
Yeah, I like that.
So I need to be honest with people because actually it's going to stop them getting into trouble.
Yes.
And that's part of care.
Yes.
So if we're caring for our people, we do need to be honest with them. But honest, and I'm not talking about being brutally honest.
No.
It's about being sensitive to people. But if something's not right, we need to tell them. As I say to some of my delegates, if you've got people in your team who are not performing, there's only one person who can tell them. They're not going to get the good performance fairy visiting them on a Saturday night to put them right.
This. You actually said this to me 20 years ago.
Absolutely. They're not going to see a vision on their way down the A13 that stops their car and goes, you have been wrong, you now need to do this. None of that stuff's going to happen. They're just going to do what they do.
Yes.
So I think that I'm sensing that there's a lot more acceptance that should be happening. And I guess the other thing I'm feeling from people is an awful lot of frustration, being asked to do more and more and more with less and less and less. And at some point, there will be a break. We're jokingly talking about being grey-haired. I'm very happy to be grey-haired right now.
Yes.
Because I've got 3 girls out there and they're working their socks off.
Yes.
Working really hard, and they're very good at what they do. But I look at their workloads, it's like, wow.
Yes.
Okay. And the world is a very, very different place. But I'll go back to, we created that.
Yes.
We're demanding of other people.
Yes.
And therefore other people will be demanding of us. So we're actually creating that sort of vicious cycle where the demand gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, just think about Amazon. People are very virtuous about it.
Yeah.
And, support local shops. But actually I'll get it from Amazon because they can deliver it to my door.
We literally had this conversation in the previous podcast.
Yeah.
Literally this conversation. We, in fact, the conversation we actually got to was, I either read an article or heard this as a news bite where some 16, 17-year-olds were saying, oh, there's these places you can go now where you can walk in and try clothes on. And then if you don't like the size, ask somebody to help you and they can get you another. I'm like, oh, what you mean a shop, an actual shop? And this is real. I heard this.
Hey, you know what? As you know, I've been training for a long, long time. And I do a fair bit of work around in the change arena. And I just used the story about a record. Then the record became a CD. And then the CD became a mini disc. And then it becomes a streaming, and then it's a playlist.
Yes.
And even now I talk to people and I go, I sometimes slip and I go, so remember CDs? And everybody looks at me blankly. Okay, iPods, what?
Yeah.
And there's so many things that have just shifted. The reality is that for us, the last 40 to 50 years, we've seen more change than any other part of history than perhaps the wheel might be the only exception to that.
Yes.
And then people say we're not very good at change.
Yes.
I can remember being 16, and probably the technology that we've got today it'd be mind blowing.
Yes. Yeah, and we've changed, and we almost don't know that we have.
Absolutely.
How we got there.
It's simple things like petrol, going to the bank.
Yes.
Going to the bank. I was 16, 17, going to the bank. You got there, you had to be there between 9 and I think it was 3 o'clock.
Yes, that's right.
And woe betide if you went at lunchtime, because they'd all go to lunch.
Yes.
And there'd be nobody there.
Yeah.
And now I can literally just pick up my phone now and send you £5.
Yeah.
And you'll have it in a split second.
Yeah, absolutely.
So no, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, by the way. I'm just saying it's interesting what it creates in terms of expectation.
Yes.
And drive. Yes. And of course, somewhere along the line, that has to be created by people.
Yes. Just a career highlight, Robin. Talk to me. Something you've done. Just something. There was just a moment where you just went, I'll never forget that. I affected. What you do affects a lot of people.
It does.
Often.
It does. I think it would be impossible for me to think of one highlight. I think it would be too difficult.
Right.
I think the highlight is just receiving thanks from people, and seeing people change and succeed.
Yeah.
So, at the moment I'm working with a client and we're doing a talent development program. We're on our third tranche now. The second tranche, we went through 10 people. I think 7 got promoted into new roles, either in or outside the business. And those people are still in contact with me.
Yeah, I love that.
So, I still see people from, I'll finish on a little story. I used to work in Southend, and I used to train YTS. And for those of you who are not familiar with YTS, it's a youth training scheme.
I remember it well. I started life on YTS.
Absolutely. And many people did, 16 to 18-year-olds. And I was working with this company in Southend. Anyway, I was working on something called the AAT, which is an accounting technicians thing. And I left that role, got headhunted somewhere else. And anyway, I think it was last year, I was driving down Fairfax Drive quite happily, and somebody cut me up. And I don't get excited by this stuff anymore. So I was turning right, so I just pulled up alongside, pressed the button to lower the window, and this guy was in his car. He lowered his window, a couple of angry eyebrows staring at me. And I looked at him and I just went, James, you should be so careful when you're driving. And this guy went absolutely white. And the lights changed and I turned right.
I love that.
And I can imagine this guy whole afternoon going, how the hell did this guy know my name? So one of the things I pride myself on is remembering people's names.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's real
talent, that, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just such a rewarding job. And again, we keep saying we're grey. And people do have conversations with me about, oh, you must be, thinking about retiring. No, it's too exciting. It's too interesting. I learn too much for me to walk away from this. I'm going to be around for a good number of years. Yeah.
Honestly, Robin, I'll end on this. There has never been more need for what you do and for what we do, for what it's worth, than now. Never been more need. Absolutely. Because change is so rapid, and organisations and thereby people really need a sense of purpose of why we're doing all this. So I think we might hopefully be gainfully employed for some time.
Fingers crossed.
Robin, thanks for this. We're going to invite you on again. Will you come on again?
Of course.
Because there's other bits of this conversation that I think I'd really like to investigate more.
Absolutely.
So again, appreciate you being part of the MECast. It's been absolutely fascinating. Absolutely love the bones of you, mate. I've known you for a long time. Let's keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.